Welcome to Destination Sasquatch.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Reggie Bird.
Oh, what are we talking about today?
Hey, I think we should get into when we were up at a very secret location up in the Blue Mountains, and we were joined by our friends, Dr. Jeff Meldrum and Cliff Barackman.
Yeah, buddy. Was it fun?
Oh, was it fun? It was insane.
No, one of the weirdest things in my entire life happened to me that night. I'm not gonna lie. I felt like I was gonna mess my pants, and I have never been. And we'll tell you about a few experiences that we've had
Mm-hmm.
up in the blues in different areas, but um, this was tops.
Oh, man.
And if I hadn't been there with Cliff and Dr. Meldrum, and granted, Dr. Meldrum was sleeping at the time, still it helped
Yes.
knowing that at the very least they would eat Jeff first because I was scared to death.
Oh, my gosh.
We
I'm
just
getting chills just thinking about
we
it.
left him asleep. Just say, hey, take him. We'll run because it was so scary, and he slept through the whole thing. It was fantastic, but unfortunately for him, he didn't necessarily get to experience it. But
Mhm.
what year was that, brother?
It was 2017, I believe.
2017.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
gonna play.
End of June.
Yeah, and just just so everyone knows, we will play you. We actually have a recording of what it is that we're talking about. So
Oof.
you'll be the first. And when I say the first, I mean you're the first because we were sitting around the campfire that night.
Mhm.
And well, let me back it up just a hair because prior to sitting around the campfire, it was just kind of getting dark.
Yeah.
And we were kind of in that weird time frame where campfires weren't allowed, and then they were for a day, and then they weren't
Mhm.
for a day. And so we weren't 100% sure as to whether we could have a campfire. And then we went out and read the sign that the nearest sign that we saw, and the verbiage interpreted that such that we could have a campfire. So we started when it was like 10:30 at night
Mhm.
before we even decided to start. It was pitch black when we started the campfire. But prior to that, we got an amazing tree knock
Oh,
as we
man.
were sitting there with,
Crystal clear.
yeah. And instantly, everybody's head is jumping and pointing at the exact same location. And I'm
Mhm.
sitting in front of the fire right here. I think Reg probably would have been right about there
Mhm.
because I just remember, and Dr. Meldrum was right up here, and Cliff was talking to Dr. Meldrum right over there. And right off in the distance to that, in that direction, which would have been northwest of our location,
Mhm.
just a absolute crystal clear tree knock. Now,
Oh, man.
remember how many roads go through that area, Reg?
Oh, what?
None.
None?
And how many trails go through that area, Reg?
None?
So 10:30 at night, what's the likelihood that an individual, which is what's required to make a beautiful tree knock like that, you need opposable thumbs. What's the likelihood? Just give me a percentage that a
Um,
human was out there in pitch black darkness 10:30 at night.
I'm gonna say negative 3,000.
I mean, why would you? There's just no reason. And we could give somebody the opportunity to say, well, I was up there. Okay, there is that slight chance, but nobody was up there,
No.
right? Nobody was up there. So at that point, we all pointed off to the area that we heard the tree knock, but we didn't have any equipment set up, right? Um, then Cliff remembered that he had his audio recorder
Recorder, yeah.
there, and he said, "Hey, I better go set this up because we heard that first tree knock.
Mhm.
We thought, oh, we may get some activity here,
Yes.
right?" So he goes and sets his recorder up. So we're sitting here at the campfire, and he sets the recorder up. It was about, probably 50 feet
Mhm.
to the north, just slightly northwest, mostly north of where our camp was located. Okay. So you can kind of picture where that recorder was. So when you hear what you're about to hear in this episode, you'll know kind of the proximity of where we're talking about.
Yes.
Right. So the next thing that you hear is another perfectly
They'll
clear
knock.
tree knock.
Yeah.
Right. And that one we did get on on
We got it
recording.
recorded. Yep.
Right, Cliff was smart enough to go put out a recorder and capture that tree knock. Same thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same thing. Reaching over, pointing,
Pointing.
exact same location. And Reg, take us away on the rest of that story. How does that go?
Basically, after hearing the knock, and pointing to the location, we started chatting, and just going over our, past expeditions and, all things Sasquatch. Jeff Meldrum was telling us about the new book he was working on.
A lot of
Cliff,
small talk,
yeah, a lot of small talk,
some
pretty much.
scientific talk between Cliff and Jeff.
Yes, some of that lingo I can,
Went over our heads.
yeah. But yeah, for the most part, we were small talking, and then we decided to. I think it was about. It got to the point where it was probably around 1, or was it earlier?
I
I
don't
can't remember.
remember.
Yeah, it was pretty late,
Yeah, it
and
got late.
because Jeff decided to go to bed first, I believe he was
Yeah.
pretty pooped.
And so where we're located, if we're here and if the viewers can see kind of where my hand is, and maybe we should put up some type of a map, but
Mm-hmm.
if our camp is located here and Dr. Meldrum is camped with us, the recorder's about 50 feet away towards the northwest.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cliff decided that he was actually going to camp separately.
Yes.
He wanted to be in a little bit separate location.
A little more isolation.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he was probably, if I'm mapping it out in my head, I'm going to say about 200 yards
Yeah, I
away
would
from
say.
us,
Yep.
somewhere in that range. And so he was about 200 yards to the east of us, slightly northeast of us, but mostly east. I remember Reggie and I staying up for just a little bit longer after
Mhm.
Dr. Meldrum went to bed. Dr. Meldrum fell asleep quick because we could hear him starting to snore. And Reggie and I decided to go get up in our tent,
Yeah.
which was probably only 20 feet from Dr. Meldrum.
Yeah.
Kind of in a little hidden area behind a couple of trees. And Reggie always falls asleep first.
Yeah.
I don't sleep much when I'm up in the mountains, right? So Reg was starting to get to that point, and I
Yeah.
kept hearing things as he was getting ready for bed. I just kept hearing things, and I'm like, bro, did you hear that? I would hear just like whistles.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's
Reggie'd be like, yeah, I did hear that, but he was kind of
kinda going in
kind of
and
going
out.
in and out.
Yeah.
And but he hadn't gotten to the point where he started snoring yet. But so I knew he wasn't out, but we kept hearing noises
Mhm.
that were coming from the south of us, of where our tent was.
Mhm.
And so we were on kind of high alert. I was a little bit disturbed because I heard this, what was very obvious, where you pull back a branch and pull it back and then let it
Let it
go, and
go.
you could hear like.
Yes.
So I heard that, which that could be any animal
Yeah.
really can make that. They just push on that enough.
Exactly.
An elk can make that. That no big deal. But nevertheless, it kind of spooked me a little bit,
Yeah.
especially based off what had happened with
With
knocks
tree
and
knocks,
stuff like
yeah,
that.
and the whistling.
Yeah, and the whistles. So we radioed over to Cliff and we said, hey, we're getting whistles. We're not exactly sure what it is, but we're getting whistles. And he radios back. He's like, yeah, I'm getting the same thing over
yeah.
here, which is very common characteristic for Sasquatch to kind of put you into a triangular or try to surround you. But we always notice that we're getting kind of triangular patterns
Yeah.
out of them and how they're coming at us from different directions.
Which
It
has
happens
happened to
all the
us,
time.
yeah.
So that just made sense to us. So that was kind of interesting. Cliff said he was just going to keep track and he wanted us to call back every time we had some activity.
Mhm.
Call me back on the radio. I don't care what time of the night it is. I'll jot it down in my log so that I know exactly what sound it was and when
And
it
what
was.
time, yeah.
Right. And so at that point, Reggie and I decided we were just going to kind of try to go to sleep.
Mhm.
And I noticed as Reg was laying down next to me, I noticed a light way off in the distance. And so I decided to undo the interior liner of our tent so that I could see through the mesh and see just what was going on. And I knew that Cliff had said something about wanting to set up a perimeter of sensors,
Mm-hmm.
probably game crash. He didn't actually tell us what he was setting up,
No.
but he was setting something up electronically to capture any activity that had happened. So I kind of got the sense when I looked out, and I was trying to see what, and I figured out it was Cliff with his headlamp, and I was just kind of seeing what he was doing. And he had walked from his camp, he had gone south, and he was going toward a thicker area through a little meadow, probably 75 yards, right in that range
Mm-hmm.
from where he was camped. And he didn't have a tent or anything. He was just, he stays out with just a sleeping bag. And so um, you see him kind of walk over there, and he's doing something on that edge where it gets a lot more thick, a lot more treed, a lot of brush. And then it happened. The sound that you're about to hear can only be explained as times 10. And what I mean by that is whatever you're hearing, no matter what you crank that up to, when you're up in the mountains, that sound is magnified times 10.
Oh, insane.
It scared the living hell out of me. To be woken, or to be, Reg was kind of in that in and out still,
Yes,
that to
yes.
be woken with that scared the hell out of him.
Oh my
I
gosh.
was awake and watching Cliff, and Cliff's reaction when he heard the sound was to stumble backwards. And I remember watching his headlamp stumble and him jolt across that meadow back toward his camp. Probably to grab some equipment. What we heard sounded like, and I remember telling Reg, I remember frantically grabbing Reggie and saying, dude, you've got to wake up. You've got to wake up. And he was awake, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
And I said, I think somebody's killing Cliff.
Yeah. You really thought something was going
I,
on.
I thought somebody was attacking Cliff. At that moment when you're in massive shock, you're not exactly sure whether that is gunfire. Now looking back or hearing back, there's
Oh, it
no
was
way
no
on,
way.
on,
Yeah.
on earth it's gunfire. But at the time, those are the thoughts that are going through your head. I was freaking out. I have never drawn my pistol in the middle of the night. I had my 357 drawn and pointed out that tent, and I wanted to shoot anybody that came near me. I was that scared. Reggie and I were shoulder to shoulder
Yeah.
in our small tent looking through the window, and we see this light come toward us from where Cliff was. Immediately, my thought, somebody just killed Cliff, and they grab, and I'm not kidding you when I say my heart's pounding a million miles a minute. My breath is short. I cannot catch my breath. I am that scared.
Yeah.
I think somebody attacked Cliff, and now
They're
they're just
coming for us.
running with his headlamp over toward us.
Yeah.
And it ended up being Cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Cliff got about 30, 40 feet from our tent when he said, what the hell is that? And I said, who the hell are you? I was like, who is that?
Yeah.
And at about the same time, he said, what is going on? What is that?
He was trying to figure it out as well.
He said, are you guys shooting over here? And I said, no, I'm not shooting over here. And which it goes to show you, even in his mind, now I'm telling you, he was probably 5 feet from a Sasquatch at that time.
Oh,
And
without
we'll
a doubt.
explain that a little bit later and why we think that as you've had an opportunity to hear the sound. But I'm
And
telling
change
you,
your shorts.
change a little moment. So you can imagine how scared Cliff must have been. But in his moment of shock, he also thought, who's shooting? Who's shooting at me? When you listen back to the sound, you're going to be like, why'd those guys ever think that was gunfire? That's obviously not gunfire. Well, I know. I was born and raised. I've got more I love firearms
Mhm.
and firearm collecting. That's fantastic. You don't understand what the shock was like when you're there in the middle of the stinking night and you hear something
Unbelievable.
like this attacking your friend.
Yeah.
And what are you
Just
going to go to? You're going to go. I mean, obviously, you think it's Sasquatch, but at the time you think somebody just shot and killed my friend.
mhm.
It scared us so bad. So Cliff comes running up to the camp, and then immediately after he figured out, okay, it's not them. It is what I thought it was.
Mhm.
He goes to wake up Dr. Meldrum. Dr. Meldrum was asleep, and the first thing that Cliff said to him was,
He said they're here.
"They're here," which was enough to pique Dr. Meldrum's interest.
Yep.
We had an opportunity to debrief. Cliff fitted us with night vision,
Yep. Yep.
and
At that
Reg,
point,
how did you feel at that point
oh
going out?
man, I was pretty much on autopilot. You know what I mean? I'm walking around the campground. I have this night vision on, but I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just in just utter shock at this point. I can hear Paul and Cliff talking back and forth to each other, but I'm so shaken up that I'm literally just a walking robot at that point. I'm just trying to gather myself, trying to just make sense of everything that's going on around me. Because that sound, I mean, it sounded like a rhinoceros or an elephant just running through the forest, just breaking everything in its path, and it's right on top of us. So just trying to process that and make sense of it while putting on this equipment and going out towards the sound. You can't imagine it. I mean, unless you're there right then, it you can't even do it justice, in telling you guys. So we're just hoping that, when you hear the sound and, turn it up, try to get as much, sound that you can get from it, as loud as you can get it. So that way you can kind of get somewhat of an effect that we heard that night.
And did it help having night vision on?
No.
did, did it make it worse?
It made it worse.
Because you can actually see everything. You're
Because
like, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because that just, I remember walking over and Cliff was like, here, yeah, put these on. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
it's so dang scary.
Yeah, I don't want. At that point I was like, do I want to see what made this sound?
I want to ask you something. Reggie and I kept asking us, like, this is the moment when you realize what it takes to be a Sasquatch researcher and how crazy you have to be. People will hear sounds.
Yes.
Right? We've heard fantastic sounds. There were some sounds out of Ontario that were recently recorded of those howls. It was just fantastic. Right? You, as the researcher, you're telling me that I'm supposed to go toward that sound?
No, buddy.
Right?
I'm sorry.
It's just insane. Like, that's what our job is.
Yes.
Is to go to the sounds that scare you.
In order to get the evidence, you have to go where no one else is willing to go.
And that was extremely scary. So it did sound, as you'll hear from the sounds of crashing. We feel, and there's a moment right about 5 seconds if the viewers want to pause the audio and try to hear. It's right about 5 seconds. Wasn't it about
5 seconds? Yep.
right in there, where you can hear "Ooh, ooh." And what we believe that is because you just hear this like catastrophic crashing of wood on wood and just anger. You can hear
aggression.
anger in the thumps and the thuds that you hear. Boom.
Yeah.
And we're talking, we are in the middle of nowhere. No one's around us.
No one.
Promise you that. When you're hearing the percussion, you feel it in your bones and you feel that vibration. That's scary.
Oh.
So you hear the crashing, you know it's wood. So either it's falling from trees. There's no wind. Yeah, it's falling from trees and whatever, and it just happens to create that percussion first. Now, it's not doing that. So we know that it had to be something with opposable thumbs, right? And any other human that's absolutely stupid enough to walk up there in the middle of the night and do that around somebody, you're going to get killed. There is no way it was another human. So something is grabbing and feel. Please go back and listen to that audio. Something is grabbing massive portions of trees and slamming it against something. and busting those. I believe what we believe, looking back on that now, we
Mhm.
believe that Cliff walked right up to a Sasquatch that was probably looking at him thinking, does he see me? Does he see me?
Mhm.
Maybe Cliff startled him, but I believe that Cliff just got a little bit too close unknowingly. Of
Mhm.
course, he didn't know that the Sasquatch was standing there. I think he was 5 feet from that Sasquatch. That's how pinpoint I can hear those sounds and where those occurred as I'm looking back and as I'm listening back to those sounds. He was close,
Oh man.
and the tantrum that Sasquatch threw, and then you hear crackling in other locations. You got to remember, Reg and I were still at our tent when you're here when you're hearing that crackling. And think about this: what you're hearing is an audio recorder here,
Mhm.
200 yards away from this sound that you're actually hearing.
Exactly.
So Cliff is a couple hundred yards away. That sound came from right where Cliff was, 200 yards away from a simple audio recorder. Imagine how loud that was for Cliff standing right there. It must have been extremely scary. And
Without question.
you can hear about 5 seconds in, you hear that woo. It's faint,
Mhm.
but try to listen for it. We believe that that may have been another Sasquatch telling that
Sound.
Sasquatch,
Okay.
calm down, cool
Right.
your jets,
Exactly.
because it just stops.
Yep.
And we just believe that was a calming sound that was given to the to that Sasquatch who was throwing a tantrum. Now later on that night, we went back to bed. I'll be honest with you, we did not explore up into the interior of the woods. We walked some roads
Yeah.
that were relatively nearby. We did not go into the interior. We researched it the next day, found some interesting things, but later on that night, we continued to hear trees breaking, continued to hear whistles all
Mhm.
around us
Like from the
in a
back,
in a
front.
very playful manner.
Yeah.
There
Just
was nothing threatening about it
yeah.
in
At
any
that
way,
point.
shape, or form. It was just merely they were just kind of communicating and walking around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Crazy night.
It was a time that, it's not the first knocks, it won't be the last knocks we've had,
No, not by any means.
but I believe it's the closest we've come to a sign of aggression. And, it's blatantly obvious, so when people ask, "Well, are Sasquatch aggressive?" I don't know, I mean, I imagine they could be, just they're an animal.
Yeah.
I imagine they could be. And the bigger question is, what kind of power do these things have? Immeasurable power.
Mhm.
I mean, this is some massive power that it takes. And I think that's all you really need to understand about a Sasquatch is if they wanted to kill you, you have nothing to worry about. They're going to kill you. I mean, don't worry about whether or not they want to or any of that. I mean, you're just getting caught up in something that we're just guessing at. Um, but that showed me they're not a violent animal,
Oh yeah, for sure.
because Cliff wouldn't be here today if that were a violent animal. It had
Yeah.
every opportunity to snatch him, and we would have never seen him again. And
Mhm.
that so when people ask that question, no, of course we don't have the answer, but that is one example of where Sasquatch could have done something and didn't.
Yeah. And I think it was just trying to send a message that hey, you're too close. And if and Sasquatch, if you're listening out there, message received.
Yeah, not to say that we won't try to get that close anytime soon, but it absolutely did scare the living tar out of us. We're happy to share.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you.